FOG number 111 is Matt Rogers. Matt has the distinction of scoring all of Queensland points in his Origin debut, a 9-8 win in Game 1 of the 1999 series. Matt was born in Caringbah in New South Wales and moved to Queensland at the age of 9, where he played for the Nerang Roosters. Despite being eligible for both states, Matt chose Queensland and went on to play 5 Origin games for the Maroons, scoring 37 points in those 5 matches. Matt made his Test debut for Australia in 1998 and was a member of the 2000 World Cup winning side. Following the 2001 season, Matt left Cronulla and the NRL to play rugby, where he represented the Wallabies on 45 occasions. In 2007, Matt returned to rugby league and was a member of the Gold Coast Titans inaugural team, retiring from the game due to injury in 2011 after 200 games. Well, Matt Rogers, thanks for your time. What does it mean to you to be a FOG?
As a young boy growing up, it was a pinnacle of our game, the State of Origin, and to be able to be a part of it means the world. I remember when that opportunity was put before me. I remember speaking to my parents about it. I remember my mum just breaking down in tears. It meant a lot to us as a family, it meant a lot to me as a person.
Growing up in Sydney, let's go back to the start. You had the option of choosing New South Wales or Queensland, but how did a young bloke that was born in Caringbah, the son of a Sharks legend, end up playing for the Nerang Roosters and moving to the Gold Coast?
Yeah, what a lot of people don't know is my dad grew up on the Gold Coast. My mum was a Gold Coast girl. She was one of 13 kids. And my dad played for the Southport Tigers in 1972 when they won the premiership. And he went to Sydney the next year as an 18-year-old and took my mum with him. And we were born, my brother and sister and I were born in Sydney from a Queensland couple. And a lot of people don't understand the background of that. And so I got criticised a lot when I chose to play for Queensland. And it really frustrated me. So I appreciate the opportunity to sort of share my story, because a lot of people just brush over it. Like, your dad played for New South Wales, you should have played for New South Wales. Well, in essence, my dad should have played for Queensland. And he never did. So Wayne rang me a couple of weeks prior to selecting the Queensland team and said, will you play for Queensland? And to be honest, I didn't think I was allowed to, because my dad played for New South Wales. I thought they were going to force me to play for New South Wales. And my nan and pop, I moved to Queensland as a 9-year-old because my nan and pop still lived up here, and Dad wanted to be closer to his family. And so I grew up in Queensland. I went to high school all through Queensland. I played for Queensland as a 12-year-old, as a 15-year-old, as a 17-year-old. So when Wayne rang me and he said, do you want to play for Queensland again? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, don't tell me now. He said, I want you to ring your dad and call me back. So I rang Dad, and Dad goes, you're speaking to the wrong person, call your mum. So I called Mum and I said, Mum, Wayne Bennett just rang me. He wants me to play for Queensland. She just broke down in tears. She's like, oh, I'll be so happy to be able to support you in my home state. And when your mum does that, I mean, what hope, and I didn't want to change anyway. So to be able to sort of put my hand up and say I'm playing for Queensland was a very easy decision for me. And I rang Wayne back and I said, yeah, I'm in. And he said, all right, well, here's the deal. He said, there's 2 weeks until the side's selected. If I hear anybody talking about you playing for Queensland between now and then, you'll never play for Queensland. That was a tough 2 weeks for a 20-year-old kid not to keep his mouth shut. But not only that, for my dad to keep his mouth shut too. That's what I was worried about. So I told Dad the deal, and he said, yeah, no worries, mate. No one will hear anything from me. So I got the opportunity to put on the maroon jersey again, and yeah, it was a dream.
Of course, nowadays it's not even a discussion. You qualify for Queensland well and truly because of those under 12, 15, 17, etc. So unlike a number of FOGs who either started playing rugby league late or weren't really, noticed until they were in their late teens, you were one of these young players that was noticed from an early age. So was there always this aspirational knowledge that, you might follow in your father's footsteps and be a really good rugby league player? When did that pressure start to hit you?
It's a bit of a weird one. I there's a different era back then, right? Like, and I think we all went through it. Our parents back in those days, my old man was a hard man. He's hard to get approval from. You know, he'd play good. He'd look at your errors, not your good performance. It was just tough. And to be honest, after I played in that under-12 Queensland side, Dad, I just wasn't getting any love off Dad. And I just thought, I've had a gutful. And I stopped playing. I didn't play at the age of 13. So I stopped playing altogether. So from the age of 12 to 14, I didn't play a game of footy. I just surfed. And I got myself into a fair bit of trouble. And I got sent to boarding school and to the Southport School on the Gold Coast, and it was the changing of me. Sort of my old man said, he goes, you went there a boy and you came out a man. And he was right. What that school did for me was phenomenal. And it was in there when I realised, I remember ringing my dad at one point. I said, Dad, can you make money playing sport? Because teachers kept telling me that I couldn't make money playing sport. I wasn't the greatest student. And I went to the Southport School on a scholarship to play rugby. Rugby was an amateur game. And I just had in my mind, I'm going to make money playing sport. And I remember ringing Dad saying, Dad, can you make money doing this? And he goes, mate, if you're the best in the world, you can make money doing anything. He said, you just keep working on your footy. And that's when it really just clicked in me that, I want to be a footballer. And anybody around me at that age, from like 14 to 17, if you were in my space, you knew what I was about. And if you tried to get in the way of it or hinder it, then you weren't going to be in my space. Like, I was very driven and very focused. There wasn't a day, and boarding school was so good for me because I just had a ball in my hands before and after school every day. I was on the fields, probably on the fields when I shouldn't have been, when I should have been in class. Many times, actually. I had teachers come down to the field and find me and drag me back to class. But that was my goal. And I had this argument with my science teacher once. He's like, you're not focused and blah, blah, blah. I said, well, you get your best science student and get them down on the field. And I said, you can't make me do what they're good at if I can't make them do what I'm good at. Like, it's unfair. And that was back in the day when everybody had to learn the same and do the same. And it just didn't fit. And I was just not happy with it. So I was very focused on what I was focused on. And anyway, my old man sort of let me know that, in no uncertain terms, to stay committed to what I believed in. And in those 4 years, it's when it really shifted towards me wanting to play football for a living.
So you're at TSS, a rugby school, on basically a rugby scholarship. How did you then continue to play rugby league and end up at Cronulla? Was that a major decision to follow at a club your father played at, or was there a real sort of desire to step out of that shadow?
Well, funnily enough, I had no desire to come back to rugby league at that point. And it was only my old man, like, again, very hard-nosed and hated rugby. And I think even when I was a professional, I think he came to 2 games and I had to pay for both of them for him to come to. So at the end of school, I was resigned to the fact that I was going to stay in rugby because I didn't have any manager pushing my barrow, and Dad was living in Darwin, and he was so sort of divorced from the mainstream game that there was no connection. But he had a mate of his who lived at Robina, a guy named Tommy Bishop, and he graded Dad in 1973, gave him his opportunity. And Tommy, if you know Tommy, he doesn't pull his punches. He's hard as a coffin nail, Tommy, and he used to come and watch me play and report back to Dad how I was going, because Dad didn't believe anyone from the rugby side if he spoke to him. So he wanted to know how I was going from Tommy. And Tommy would sit in the stand, watch me play, go home, ring Dad, tell Dad how I was going. And
did you know this was happening?
Didn't until after. And anyway, Tommy rang Cronulla at the end of my year 12 year, and I'd played Australian schoolboys in rugby. And no one knew from the rugby league circles where I was, and Cronulla didn't know. And so Tommy rang Cronulla and said, have you looked at Sludge's boy? And Sludge being my dad, Steve, and they've gone, no, where is he? Who is he? I said, Matt Rogers. He just played Australian schools in rugby union. You should sign him. I've been watching him all year. He's one of the best talents coming out of Queensland. So they got on the phone and spoke to Dad, and I was still pretty committed to staying in rugby. I just really loved it. I'd had a really good 4 years. I just, travelled around sort of the world with the Australian schools and enjoyed it. But the kicker was my brother. He'd been battling away up in Darwin in the A-grade comp up there playing hooker, and they wanted to sign him too, but they wanted both of us. And they weren't just going to sign him, or they weren't just going to sign me. They wanted both of us. And Dad said, mate, Cronulla want you, but if you go, they'll take your brother too. And I'm like, well, I'll go to Cronulla. It wasn't easy the first 12 months, I've got to tell you. Being at Cronulla as Steve Rogers' son, like, he's a god in Cronulla. So there was a time there where I just felt like I was banging up my head up against a brick wall. I felt like every time my name was written, I felt like my name wasn't Matt Rogers. My name was Matt Rogers, son of former Test great Steve Rogers. And it embarrasses me that it annoyed me back then, because I'm so proud of what my dad did and who he was and the person that he was to the fans and to the game, that it annoys me now that it used to annoy me then. But I just sort of thought, I'm just going to put my head down and my ass up and work hard and prove myself, and fortunately it worked out.
Did you feel as though you had to prove more than you actually had to?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I felt like me being, his son. I remember going to the first training session. It was at I'd just finished like 2 days of schoolies, went straight to Sydney. They'd already been doing pre-season for 3 weeks. And I rock up 3 weeks late, and the first session I go to is a Sandhill session. And they're, it's a monster session because they're 3 weeks in, and I'm unfit off the back of schoolies as a 17-year-old kid. But I'm thinking, I've got to win every one of these races up this hill. And mate, by the end of it, I'm just heaving my guts up into the sand. But I spoke to ET about that a few years ago. We were just having a chat. I was sitting there with my son, and he goes, mate, you earned a lot of respect that day. You don't realise. He goes, because we were all watching you. We didn't know how good you were. We didn't know where you'd come from. No one had heard of you. You're playing rugby union in an environment that none of us had seen. Most of these kids had come through Jersey, Flag, SG ball, all that sort of stuff. And I hadn't, so yeah.
When did it, or was there a moment that changed that mindset where you felt that you either A, didn't have to prove it anymore, or you'd already proven it? When did you feel comfortable?
Oh, it's a bit of an emotional story, that one. My mum was really sick. She was terminally ill from cancer, and she got. I was constantly fighting that battle to try to prove myself, and my mum got leave from. When I say leave, her doctor allowed her out of the hospital to come and watch me play a test match. She'd never watched me play a test match, and it was a night that we absolutely hammered New Zealand. And I had a blinder. I scored 3 tries and kicked a bunch of goals.
24 points.
Yeah. And
still stands as a record for an Australian player in a test match against New Zealand.
Yeah. And as I'm walking off the field, I can't remember who it was, ran up to me and said, Matty, we've got to get you to the hospital. Your mum at half time's had a fall, and we've got to take you to the hospital to see her. And I didn't know what was going on. And I got to the hospital, mum, they'd found some tumour on her brain that they hadn't seen previous. She was suffering breast cancer at the time, and it was all through her body. It was horrible. And she didn't have long to live, but they wanted to remove this tumour. And it was sort of like emergency surgery. And I went into the pre-op room, where they'd sort of dosed her up with some medication before they wheel her in, and they got me in there to see her before she went in there. Dad's out the front in tears, like thinking that this is the last time we're going to see Mum. And I went in to see her just on my own, and she said, "You made it, son." I'm like, what are you talking about, Mum? I'm just here for you. And she's like, no. She goes, I used to be Steve Rogers' wife. Now I'm Matt Rogers' mum. And that was a pretty special moment for her at that time to be thinking of me.
So how did you cope with everything that was going on? I mean, that was a pretty tumultuous time, obviously, in your life. But the lead up to that tumultuous, you said you lost your way as a teenager, you're back playing at Cronulla, etc. What got you through? Why did you not stray? What kept you focused?
just having the goal to, I wanted to play for Australia. That was sort of, the ultimate goal, to wear the green and gold, to wear that coat of arms on my chest that my dad did. I grew up watching, videos of the, 82 Invincibles. It was Mal's first, was it 78? Did he go in 78?
No.
82, yeah, 82 was his first. Watching those, highlights of that just inspired me to want to do it. I was so lucky, as a young fella to have input from so many amazing people that they probably just saw what they were saying as throwaway lines. Like the Brett Kenny line, you can do it, son. Just listen to your dad and work hard. And it made me realise in life, like, you just don't have to be that good. You just need to work hard. And most people just don't have the staying power. And I guess that was one of the things that I had, I was never big or strong or fast. Like, I could run a bit, but you put me in a straight line against a speedster, they're kicking my ass. I was never going to run over anyone, ever. And, I didn't have the best passing and kicking game ever, but I just found a way, and I was just committed to an end goal, and that's what sort of kept me going.
Well, let's go back to those Cronulla days and that phone call from Wayne Bennett, then lead up to that. When did you start thinking that you were playing well enough to potentially earn that phone call or have to make that decision, which was pretty easy for you in the end?
Yeah, it's probably around 96, 97. 96, I felt like I was sort of on the rise. And the crazy thing is, Mark, like I never felt comfortable ever when they were reading a team side out on the Tuesday. Like, I was never comfortable enough to rest on my laurels. Like, when Langy would read the team out, I was just like, I was nervous, thinking, I hope I'm in it, So I never felt like I was owed anything. So I was always sort of working hard. But there comes a point when you're just sort of hearing your name bandied around enough to think, I must be doing all right, But I'm just going to keep working hard. And I remember being out one night and ET introduced me to this couple of guys, and he said to him, "Oh, you'll play for Australia one day, this bloke." And I looked at ET like, did he just say that? And I asked him, "Mate, did you mean that?" He goes, "Yeah, you will. Just keep doing what you're doing. Don't stop doing what you're doing, and you'll play for Australia." And from that point, it gave me a belief. And again, he just said it, and he meant it, but it's just those little moments where you think that had a really, really big impact, and as a teammate, ET was and as a young kid growing up and sort of supporting Cronulla, it's hard to ignore words that come out of a guy like ET's mouth at that time, so meant a lot, and it just gave me the belief that I could do it.
So Wayne gave you a phone call 2 weeks out and told you to be quiet, otherwise you wouldn't play for Queensland. What about when you officially found out that you were going to play for Queensland for the first time? What was the emotion like then when you could tell people?
Well, it was enormous for me. My mum was one of 13 kids, so you can imagine how many cousins I got that live on the Gold Coast. So when I started playing at the Gold Coast, I used to have to get 20 tickets a game, and I'd give them to my aunt, and I'd say, "You distribute them fairly amongst all the cousins, whoever wants to come, whatever." So that was exciting. It got bad though, because I had to go to training, and you can imagine what that Cronulla dressing room was like, and it literally nearly came to blows. That's how much emotion is in State of Origin, and I had.
Did they not understand?
No, not at Origin.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reason goes out the door and emotion comes in, and trying to reason with them just made it worse. They saw Steve Rogers as a New South Wales great, and I should have been too. And the fact that I'd turned my back on that they literally wanted to fight me, and it was hard. It was a really tough couple of weeks in the lead up to that first game.
Did it take away from the moment?
A little bit, yeah, without a doubt. but then getting around the boys and getting around that Queensland team, that made it all worthwhile.
What was it like when you received that jumper for the first time and preparing for that first game?
Can I tell you a story about that? I remember sitting in a team meeting. Chris Choppy Close, absolute legend of a man, love him to death, was our team manager. The care and the thought and the effort that he put into that team was just second to none. And I was sitting front row of our team meeting. There was no coaches in the room. There was just Choppy and the 17, 18 players in the room. And Choppy started going on about what it meant to wear this Queensland jersey. There was a few debutants in the room. And mate, let me tell you, he went hard. And he started talking about what New South Wales people are. And I can't say that here, you can imagine, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, he's talking about my old man. And I thought, yeah, he's right. And yeah, he certainly, you know, having your old man play for New South Wales, there's a few weeks a year when the hate builds up, I can tell you.
That first game was dreamlike. You scored every point in a win. You kicked the winning field goal. 9-8 was the score. 4 goals to Matt Rogers and a field goal. All of Queensland's points.
Bombed a try too.
Yeah, but the game was still won. Yep. But it was, can you take us back and what was going through your mind running out on the field and literally winning the game for Queensland?
Well, we had a tremendous team, obviously, and as did New South Wales, so it was a real battle. I just remember the back end of the game, we're going end to end, and New South Wales started having shots at field goal. I thought, we've got to kick a field goal. I used to kick a lot of field goals in rugby union, and I was playing on the wing, so it's not typical. Anyway, I would come in and I'd do some long kicks from time to time, just because I had a bigger boot than Adrian Lamb, so they'd throw me in there to sort of get us out of trouble. Anyway, we got down, but I wouldn't do that in the attacking zone. But anyway, I thought, I'll stuff it. I'm just going to go into the middle of the field and just wait. And I snuck into the middle of the field with a few minutes to go. And Dulce was the hooker, and he saw me. And as soon as he saw me, he caught my eye. And as soon as he caught my eye, he just gave me a look that I knew he was going to hit me with the ball. So they went again, and then they hit me with the ball, and I just knocked it over. And it probably worked out well because I don't think they were expecting a winger to be in there kicking a field goal. So the pressure came, but it probably came a little bit too late. And it was a bludger of a kick. It wasn't very good, but it was good enough.
So what did that moment do to your life?
Mate, my life went from being just this first grade footballer to being like put on this pedestal that like I really struggled to handle. Like it was such a big moment for me. You know, I ended up, you know, on the front page of everything, and you know, even the next day flying back to Sydney, you know, the pilots for Queenslanders are like, Matty, come into the cockpit, and this is before 9/11, so the cockpits were open. Yeah. Come into the cockpit and land the plane with us, and I'm like, I said, I did that. That'll be the last time I do that. That was pretty freaky. I'd rather be sitting down the back. But the press and the attention was just, it was overwhelming. Yeah, you realise real quick how big and what the game meant to the state and to the general public.
And your Sharks teammates when you went to training?
Yeah, they were off me. Yeah, the Sharks boys weren't happy at all. But, you know, at that point I was just over it. I didn't care. I just gave it back to them as good as I got, and I just got fed up with having to justify anything to anyone. I knew exactly why I was wearing the Queensland jerseys because I was meant to, and yeah, I was very proud to do it.
So what led to leaving not only Cronulla but rugby league and playing with the Wallabies for a number of years where you had an outstanding career?
Yeah, it was a combination of things, you know, in relation to the departure of going over to rugby. It was probably, my old man had become the boss at Cronulla. My mum was terminally ill. There was a whole lot of emotional stuff that was going on in my life that was just not great for me. Rugby hadn't spoken to me at all. My mum was in palliative care. My dad was the CEO, and I was one of the Cronulla stars. And it seemed like to me at the time, so Dad could take pressure off himself, he'd just use me to go and do all this extracurricular stuff for Cronulla that would allow him to not have to worry about doing what he needed to do. And it drove a real wedge between my dad and I, and we just didn't talk, and it was a horrible time because my mum and his wife was terminally ill, and she probably had a few months to live, and I just wanted my dad back. I wanted to be able to give my dad a hug and tell him I loved him, and we're in this together, and we just weren't there. So I rang a very close, dear friend of ours who's passed now, a fellow by the name of John Dunphy, who was a major sponsor at Cronulla and used to own Shimano Fishing and looked after us with fishing reels and everything, great fella. Very astute businessman. And I said, Dunph, you're going to hate me saying this, but I've got to get out of Cronulla. I didn't have a manager. I said, can you facilitate a meeting with the ARU for me? And we'll do it at your office. And he said, yep, no worries. I went and spoke to Mum, and Mum said, and this is like on a deathbed basically, Mum said, you can't leave Cronulla. She goes, it's going to ruin your old man. If you leave Cronulla, it's going to ruin him. And I said, Mum, it's not, I don't have an old man. If I stay at Cronulla, it'll destroy us. And she's like, okay. So she sort of left it at that. About 2 weeks later, she rang me and she goes, can you come and see me? And I'm like, yeah. And I went in there and I saw her. She goes, you have to get out of Cronulla. She goes, you and your dad, this is ridiculous. You've got to get away from him. He's not going anywhere. You can, you go. So I had that meeting with the ARU. There was no money talked at all. They left. I sat there with John. I said, just do a deal. I said, I'll go. And he said, mate, they haven't talked money. I said, money's going to be good regardless. Wherever I go, the money's going to be good. Just do a deal and just get me over there. So did that deal and left and got my old man back. We became super tight again, and were able to sort of manage a pretty difficult time in our career as best as we could.
Then you end up sort of coming full circle in some respects back to the Gold Coast. Was that retrospectively a nice way to end, to play the last years of your career on the Gold Coast, or was that a difficult time as well?
No, that came out of a pretty difficult time. That was after my old man had taken his life. So I needed to get out of Sydney and just I was living in Cronulla. Steve Rogers, dies, and I'm Matt Rogers, and everywhere I went, I was just getting bombarded with stuff, and I couldn't do it. And so I literally was going to retire. I'm like, I'm just going to quit playing footy and move to the country or move to Queensland and get away from this stuff, this noise. Anyway, a mate of mine said, mate, why don't you go and have a meeting with Michael Searle? He was one of the part owners at the Titans. I'm like, who's Michael Searle? He goes, he's the CEO of the Titans. Go up and have a meeting with him. Or go and have a meeting with him. I said, mate, I'm not interested. I'm really not. And he's like, just have a meeting with him. Just do it out of respect for me. I'm like, no worries. So I go and have a meeting with him. My wife said to me before I went to the meeting, don't sign anything. I'm like, I won't sign anything. So I go into the meeting and Searle writes something on a piece of paper. He painted a great picture, don't get me wrong. Searle, he did paint a good picture. And it did entice me a little bit. But he just wrote a number on a piece of paper and he slid it across. He goes, all right, you've heard my story. If I pay you that, will you come? And I was in a very nonchalant mood. So I just said, if you double it, I'll think about it. And he goes, well, if I double it, will you sign right now? And I'm like, yep. So he put a letter of intent together and I signed it. And I walked out the door and I rang my wife. She's like, I said, you better pack your bags. She goes, what? You said you wouldn't sign anything. Well, I said, well, there's a lot of reasons I signed and they're all dollars. So we're going. So anyway, she's been amazing. She sacrificed a lot for me to come and finish up here. But to get home, when I went to rugby, I actually wanted to come and play for the Reds initially, but they wouldn't let me because Wendell had signed and he was here. And they didn't want both of us in the same spot. So I did want to get back to Queensland. It was a perfect segue for me to get back here.
Listening to you talk about the journey, it would have been very easy for a lot of people to fall by the wayside. What kept you going with all the off-field dramas, with the illness for your mother, the passing of your father, even the pressure from your Cronulla teammates, etc.? How did you cope with all that? How did you stay focused? And I know that the mental health space is very important in your life nowadays, but back then, were you aware of what was happening?
Oh, no, not the mental health space back then was not. I think my old man's death was a real catalyst for awareness and understanding a lot more about it, among others. But he certainly, it was a heavy issue. But what kept me going? I just didn't know any different, to be honest. Like, no, I've had friends say to me, "How did you do it?" I'm like, I don't know. I really can't put a finger on it. I just felt like that's what I had to do. I had kids at a young age. I needed to support. I just felt responsible. And if I wasn't going to do it, who was? Really. I mean, I wasn't trying to be a hero or anything. I was just doing what I knew I was good at. And I will say, like, one of the biggest blessings that you get out of sport is the camaraderie that you have with your teammates. As men, to be around another group of men that are focused on that same goal and that got that drive. And look, let's be honest, like, I'm not mates with all my teammates. I've got a lot. I'll put it this way: I've got a lot of friends that I played footy with, but I've only got a few mates. And those mates are the ones that got me through it, to be honest. All those days, and all football players will know that. Like, you're friends with your whole team, but you're only mates with a few of them. Like, that's the way it works. I mean, it's the same in every work environment. And those guys are the ones that, through those tough times, I'm so glad that I had those guys in my life. And still to this day, I've created environments in my life to replicate that, so that if things do get tough for them or for me, I've got someone who I can lean on, or they've got someone they can lean on to help us, move forward in a positive light. Who's
had the biggest influence on your career?
Oh, I'll be my old man, without a doubt. Like, I was, like, if my old man wasn't who he was, like, I don't think I have the career I have. I was constantly trying to chase him down, and that's why when he took his life, I didn't want to play anymore. I was like, man, what? I'm trying to be you, and you just did that. Like, it just didn't make any sense to me. But understanding that, I had an amazing doctor in my life at the time, Sharon Flahive. She's still a doctor with Rugby Australia. Amazing woman. Just spent a lot of time with me over a month or two, and just got my head in the right space to realise that, this is what I love to do. And, being around this group of men and, the friends that I've created, I've fostered over the years, like, don't turn your back on it. And she was right.
How do you look back on that time now, that your playing career, because it seems that every major milestone or every achievement has been tinged with a little bit of sadness, straight disappointment or pressure. Were you able to enjoy it at the time, or do you look back now and wonder how you got through it?
I look back now and wonder how I got through it. It's funny because a lot of people could look at my life and go, oh, how lucky is he? He's married, kids, and had this amazing career. But you can't just have that bit. You got to have all of it if you want my life. And there's a lot of it that's not much fun. And I don't know how I got through it, and I didn't. And I look back now, and I had some great times, but it was a struggle. But now I look back, and I'm proud of myself. Like, I'm like, wow, I got through all that, and ended up having a pretty handy career, in a couple of codes that I'm incredibly grateful for.
When did you realise that? When were you able to look at it that way?
About 5 years after I'd finished. And it was my 18-year-old son now. So I retired 14 years ago. So about 2 years after I'd finished, Maxie got diagnosed with autism. Oh no, it was just as I'd finished, Maxie got diagnosed with autism. And the struggles that came along with that, and it was before NDIS and all that, and the money, and it was just an absolute nightmare. And I literally remember sitting on my front step one night, like in tears, just looking at the sky going, what have I done? What the hell have I done to, like, it's just one thing after another. And then we started our charity that, you know, raises money for families with autistic children, because the amount of money that it cost us to get Maxie into a position to go to school was just ridiculous. And no family's going to be able to afford that, like no average family. And we were just lucky, and it sent us to the wall. I'm telling you, like, we're still recovering from it. But will we do it again? Hell yeah, we do it again, because it was our son. But so many families missed out on that back then because there was no NDIS. So we started our foundation to help those families. And it wasn't until a few years into that I realised what rugby league did for me, to give me a platform to be able to help these families, and helping those families, just being able to do that, it made me so grateful for what rugby league did for me, because without it, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing. And that's when I realised, like, it was all worth it. You know, it was all worth it, because, you know, ultimately, you know, the world's full of billions of people that aren't me. And if I'm always focused on me, then it's going to be a pretty boring life, you know. So, yeah, we continue to do a bit in that space and help families and help schools. And but it was about 5 years after I'd retired that I realised, yeah, it was all worth it. It was all for a reason. And because, you know, as much as people don't understand that they look at it and they see the glitz and the glamour of it, on the other side, on our side of it, the hard work, the injuries, the pressure, you know, and it annoys me when people go, oh, they get paid. Well, they don't get paid enough, as far as I'm concerned, for what you put yourself through. But it's a job. It's not like for someone my size, like every week, it's not like you're about to run on. It's not like, oh, I wonder if it's going to hurt today. It's like, no, how much is it going to hurt today? Like, some days it's really going to hurt. Some days it's not going to hurt that much. Some days it's going to hurt real bad. And you just knew every time you were going out there, they're coming for you. And it's hard to enjoy that at times. Best part of it, though, best part, and I reckon most footy players will say this to you, is you finish a game and you've won, and that 5 minutes in the dressing room were just you and your teammates. If you could bottle that feeling and sell it, you'd never have to work another day in your life, because it'd be worth a fortune.
Well, FOG number 111, Matt Rogers, thank you so much for sharing those stories with us, and congratulations on a wonderful career.
Cheers, thanks, mate.
Thanks for watching this episode of the FOGS Queenslander podcast. If there's a FOG you want to hear from, leave a comment to let us know. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos.